The mansion doors swung open with a polished creak, and in that moment, Richard Hale realized that everything he thought he knew about being a father was about to be tested. Fresh off a grueling transatlantic flight, his polished leather shoes clicked against the marble floors as he wheeled his sleek suitcase behind him. On the surface, Richard looked every bit the man who had conquered boardrooms across Europe. Tailored suit, gold watch, the effortless confidence of a successful executive. Yet beneath the outward poise beat a heart full of anticipation, tempered by the ache of absence. A small, worn teddy bear dangled from his suitcase handle. Ethan's favorite, a silent bridge between the father who had been away and the boy who had been waiting. Almost a month had passed since Richard last saw his son. He imagined the reunion vividly. Ethan sprinting across the marble halls, laughter bouncing off the walls, the promise of making up for lost time. He had pictured it countless times. During lonely hotel nights, during back-to-back meetings, when the sterile hum of fluorescent lights replaced the warmth of a father's embrace. But reality, as always, had its own plans, with every step deeper into his quiet home. Richard felt a tightness in his chest, not from the jet lag or the weight of his suitcase, but from the weight of months of absence. He envisioned Ethan's bright blue eyes lighting up as he ran into his arms, the embrace stronger than any business victory or bonus check. But underneath that longing was a gnawing truth he had kept at bay. Success had kept him away. And in that absence, a stranger had filled the space he should have occupied. Richard's steps slowed as he reached the kitchen doorway, hand resting lightly on the teddy bear tied to his suitcase. What he expected was silence, perhaps the faint hum of the refrigerator or the lingering aroma of late supper. What he found instead rooted him to the spot. At the counter stood a young black woman he did not recognize. Her gray apron hung loosely over her shoulders, wrinkled as though it bore the weight of the world, her form trembling slightly. Her face was turned away, but the sound of her muffled sobs filled the room, a private grief made painfully public. Clutched tightly against her waist was Ethan, Richard's only son. The boy's cheeks were blotchy, his eyes red from crying, tiny fingers digging into the fabric of the woman's apron as though she were the last safe place in the world. "Ethan," Richard called, his voice trembling more from confusion than anger. "Let go now." Neither the boy nor the woman moved. It wasn't until his tone hardened that the woman's head snapped toward him. Tear-streaked cheeks, wide, startled eyes, the look of someone caught in a moment they had never intended. "Anyone else to witness, Daddy? No?" Ethan wailed, his voice breaking. "Don't take her away!" Richard froze. The words pierced through him, sharp and unrelenting. This wasn't just a scene of a child clinging to a caretaker. It was a plea for survival. The woman swallowed, hard before speaking, her voice tight but deliberate. "I'm sorry, sir. He won't let go." Richard took a step closer, heart pounding. Naomi Brooks, that was her name, gently stroked Ethan's back, her own tears refusing to be held back. "I burned the rice earlier," she said, laughing bitterly, "and that's why I cried. But it's not because of you." Her gaze softened as she gathered courage to say the words that had weighed on her heart. "It's because Ethan told me he wished I was his mommy." The kitchen fell into stunned silence. Forgotten pot on the stove was the only sound. Richard's jaw tightened. The words struck deeper than any boardroom defeat ever could. He glanced at Ethan, whose small hands trembled as he clung harder to Naomi's apron. "I didn't ask for that," Naomi added quickly, her voice cracking. "I didn't try to replace anyone. But he has nightmares every night," he calls out. "For someone, anyone, and there's no one but me." I held him, sang to him, stayed with him until he could breathe again. Richard felt a hollow ache in his chest. Weeks of 18-hour workdays, endless meetings, and high-stakes negotiations suddenly seemed meaningless. He remembered a brief message from his former nanny about Ethan crying in his sleep, but he had brushed it off as a phase. Looking now at his son's swollen eyes and Naomi's raw, tear-streaked face, he understood this wasn't a phase. It was loneliness. And in his absence, a stranger had become the only person who made his child feel safe. Ethan's small voice broke through his thoughts, ragged and desperate. "She helps me breathe, Daddy." The words cut deeper than any failed deal ever could. For years, Richard had told himself he was working for Ethan, building an empire so his boy would never know struggle. But standing in that kitchen, he saw the truth he had refused to face. Money could not chase away nightmares. Contracts could not hold a child through the dark. Naomi, steadying herself, placed a gentle hand on Ethan's head. "I'm not asking to stay," she said softly, her voice trembling with the weight of what she had already given. "I didn't realize how deep I was in until he said that. He needed someone, Mr. Hale, and I was here." For the first time in years, Richard felt words slip from him, leaving only silence. He had commanded entire floors of executives, dismantled competitors with precision. Now, before a crying child and a woman he barely knew, he was powerless. His carefully constructed image cracked as guilt settled heavy in his chest. "I thought I was doing the right thing," he muttered, almost to himself. "Working, building something for him." Naomi's eyes met his, firm yet fragile. "He doesn't sing a child to sleep at night, Mr. Hale. It doesn't hold their hand after a bad dream." Richard's walls crumbled. Ethan pressed his face deeper into Naomi's side, voice muffled but urgent. "Don't make her go, Daddy, please." The plea unraveled him. Gifts and promises had been hollow attempts to patch a distance no wealth could bridge. His son wasn't begging for toys or trips. He was begging for love he could touch. Richard opened his mouth, then closed it. Words caught like gravel in his throat. Naomi whispered reassurance, her voice both firm and soothing. "It's okay, sweetheart. No one's mad at you." Her words weren't just for Ethan, they were for him, too, a reprimand wrapped in compassion. "I'm not angry," Richard said quickly. "I could never be mad at him," Naomi replied, eyes flicking too. The small boy, still trembling in her embrace. Richard nodded slowly, understanding. Ethan was only 4. He didn't understand long absences, silence, or the language of wealth. All he knew was abandonment, softened by the arms that had stayed when his father could not. Richard extended his hands cautiously. "Ethan," he said softly, voice fragile, human. The boy hesitated, clinging tighter to Naomi. In that hesitation, Richard realized the chasm that had grown between them, a distance no amount of money had ever bridged. Slowly, tentatively, Ethan peeled himself from Naomi's side. His steps were careful, cautious, trust fragile as glass. When he reached his father, he didn't leap. He tested the warmth, the safety. Before melting into Richard's arms, Richard held him tightly, feeling the small body quiver against his. "Chess, I'm so sorry, buddy. I didn't know how lonely you were." "Don't make her leave," Ethan whispered, voice breaking Richard's heart. Glancing at Naomi, Richard tightened his grip. Her face told him everything. The care, the fear of dismissal, the selflessness she had given. "I don't want her to leave either," Richard said softly. Naomi's lips parted, breath caught, disbelief softening into cautious hope. She had saved Ethan. Yes, she had also saved Richard, forcing him to confront the cracks in his seemingly perfect life and giving him a chance to rebuild with love, not wealth. "Not just as the maid," Richard said, voice firm but gentle. "Stay as someone who cares about him. Maybe someone who can help me learn to be the father he deserves." Ethan's small hand clutched his sleeve, eyes glistening with hope. "Can she, Daddy?" "Please." Richard's gaze met Naomi's. "Cross the line," he said steadily. "If that's what it takes for him to feel safe again." Her shoulders relaxed slightly, a warmth flickering across her face. Not triumph, but acceptance. The pot on the stove hissed, rice slightly burnt, irrelevant now. What mattered was the small boy pressed between them. His world slowly feeling whole again. Richard retrieved the teddy bear, offering it to Ethan. "I brought this for you," he said, voice unsteady. "But I should have brought myself sooner." Ethan hugged both the bear and his father. For the first time in weeks, he didn't cry. Later, after Ethan fell asleep, Richard found Naomi quietly wiping down the stove. "I know this wasn't the job you expected," he said softly. She smiled tiredly. "It's not, but it's the job I needed." Richard nodded. If you ever want more training, school, whatever, you'll have my support. Just promise me one thing. Anything, she replied cautiously. Don't stop being who you were today, for him. Naomi's eyes softened, the walls she had built finally lowering. I couldn't if I tried. As Richard turned back to the living room, he paused, voice thick with emotion. Naomi, thank you for saving my son. She nodded silently, returning to the stove where a fresh pot of rice had begun to simmer. True love, he realized, wasn't measured in wealth or empires, but in presence, care. And the small acts that matter most, children don't need empires built in their name. They need laughter at the table, arms to hold them after nightmares, and someone who shows up when it matters.